Through 8.
Yep, that's perfect.
Oh, we're live. It is August 30th, and the Give and Go show is back in your life. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that we had gone live. My name is Griffin Queen, and not as always, but as often, I'm joined by Matt Modi, who has finally returned from his Alaskan vacation. Modi, we have missed you so much.
Thank you. Right when I come back, Ferentinos is like, I got to leave the country, who's currently in Europe.
Yeah, it feels like you guys are playing some sort of long, like extended prank on me where there can only be one co-host on the show and I've got to keep finding guest hosts every week.
Do you have a vacation planned in a couple weeks, or you're going to be here?
Not on a Wednesday. I have vacations planned, but we put a lot of work into not going in the middle of the week because usually our vacations are like 3 to 4 days. So we'll do like a Thursday night to maybe a Sunday night or a Friday morning so that we can work as much as possible, which is the most depressing thing I've ever said. But nothing coming up that I'm aware of that is going to interrupt this. So anybody who's watching on video, anybody who's listening to the audio, you're going to see my wrinkled, scarred up face pretty often. You're going to hear my wrinkled, scarred up voice. I don't know if that's a thing. Before we get going, another thing to add, Elliott here again, super producer. Appreciate you having here. Guy that makes the magic happen behind the scenes. And if you're watching us on YouTube, click the like button, comment below, whatever you want to comment. Make sure you subscribe. That's a pretty big one. And then if you're listening to us on an audio platform after the fact, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, OnlyFans audio, a downloadable MP3 track that I've sent to you via Venmo, please click the follow button. Please rate and review. Please do all that stuff.
Do they have OnlyFans audio? It seems kind of counterintuitive.
I feel like OnlyFans has audio, but I don't know if
audio only.
So you know how like ASMR is like pretty popular?
Yeah.
I imagine that there are people on OnlyFans, and I don't know this for a fact. So if I'm wrong about this, all the degenerates out there, please tell me I'm wrong about this. Feel free to comment it below. But I imagine that there are people with OnlyFans account that purely do ASMR, or maybe some people put together. I don't know if you ever watch like lo-fi beats on YouTube, where it's just like a picture of like an anime girl, reading her book or something with a fire in the background and then like a lo-fi beat with some thunderstorms. I imagine that stuff is on OnlyFans too, because kind of everything is on OnlyFans.
That's fair. Yeah.
But yeah, that's it. If you want to talk about your vacation at all, please do. We decided ahead of time that you were kind of going to run this episode, and I'm pretty excited about that. So with that being said, Modi, floor is yours. Take us away.
Yeah, I can take it away from here. So basically what happened was I wasn't able to give out my takes on a platform for about 10 days. So I just had accumulated stuff that I needed to get off my chest. So basically what I did was whenever something popped into my head, I made a note on literally on the notes app on my iPhone, condensed those into eight points. I saw Elliott's comment, found a list of top 5 ASMR. That's hilarious. But I made a list of 8 points or eight takes, whatever you want to call it. That basically the way it's going to work is Elliott is going to just spin a wheel. It's going to pick a number, and then I'm going to say what number that take was. They're not ordered in a specific order or anything. It's literally just when they came to mind. In terms of vacation, Alaska was amazing. I've never been before. I'll probably never go again. It's been on my list. I wanted to go. That in Hawaii. Now Hawaii is my number one. I would say the only complaint I have. So the vacation was my parents and my fiance's parents all went, and my sister. So it was a pretty big family vacation. Her family's amazing. I'm not just saying that because she's my fiance. It's genuinely true. And our parents get along great, which is very blessed for that. It was a cruise that they had planned, and it's definitely more tailored toward older folk. And, so like the excursions and stuff were pretty lame, even for being considered excursions. And then the cruise was like way too swanky for my own comfort level. And there's something icky that's like only old white people on the cruise, and like the staff was people of color. It kind of makes you just not feel great about yourself. But Alaska was amazing. The cruise, it was really nice. But if I had to give one complaint, that'd probably be it.
Well, that's super exciting for you. I'm glad you were able to go to Alaska. Clearly, you're trying to get out of the continental United States while remaining within the United States.
That's exactly correct.
I have been to Hawaii. I have not been to Alaska. So maybe next year we flip it. I go to Alaska, you to Hawaii, and then we talk about it after the fact.
Yeah, there we go.
I will say, though, as much as I've been to Hawaii, I haven't actually been to Hawaii. Like, I've been to Hawaii, but the day that we got to Hawaii, Julia tested positive for COVID. So we spent 7 of our 8 days in Hawaii in an Airbnb that we had not planned on staying in, basically just locked down the entire time. However, I did not get COVID because I genuinely believe that my perfect DNA makes me immune to COVID, and I have never gotten it. So I don't know if there's any like factual science behind that, and I really hope that super producer Elliott does not look it up, because I know that he knows a lot about COVID. I don't want to find out that I actually am way more susceptible than I think. But yeah, if you ever go to Hawaii, let me know how it is, because I'd like to go like genuinely at some point.
And actually go,
and
yeah.
Alaska is also on my list of destinations that I'd like to go to. Probably won't take a cruise, but haven't really thought about it a ton. So maybe I will. I don't know.
I had always wanted to go on a cruise when I went to Alaska. I probably just would have, like, if basically my fiance's parents booked it and they were like, hey, if you want to go to Alaska, like, we're doing this cruise, if you guys want to join, we probably have mutually agreed that we would have chosen something different. But considering like I was able to spend 10 days with my parents, her parents, us together, it was amazing. I'm definitely not saying it was a bad trip. It was amazing. Elliott's comments always make me laugh.
Yeah. You ever look at yourself on a video chat and realize that the way you hold yourself makes you lopsided?
Me?
Yeah. I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm talking about myself. But do you ever feel that way when you're on a video chat?
Oh, I thought you were saying like the way I specifically. No, I've never noticed that. I try to look as little at myself as possible, because it's a genuinely scary sight.
What do you look at when you're on like a Zoom call?
If I'm doing, I'll mostly just look at the speaker, or like if I'm doing a video, I'll just look at the camera.
Interesting. See, I look at myself because you might know this. I know Elliott knows this. I have a lazy eye. And so, or I have something that looks like a lazy eye. It's not actually a lazy eye. And so my eye drifts. And so I spend a lot of time staring at myself to try and control my eye and make sure that it's not drifting too much. Well, if I were to be looking at you this entire time, you would see my right eye going all over the place. I'd look like Mad Eye Moody.
That's fair. That's reasonable. Yeah, I give a little bit of a glance at myself to make sure that I don't look ridiculous. If like,
you look great. You look incredibly handsome. Yeah.
No, thank you. Appreciate that. It's the Phillies. Yeah, they're on a roll.
Shut the
all right. I've been chomping at the bit. This is the most excited I've been for an episode. I say we get right to it. Elliott, give me a number. I guess you just.
Do you want me to show the wheel, or do you want me to just tell you what number comes up in the wheel? Like, do we need to verify that it's actually that number?
I say you just give me the number.
You just give us the number.
Yeah.
All right. Here goes our wheel.
Oh, this is so exciting.
It would be really funny if he just straight up lied every single time.
All right. We got number 7.
Number 7. All right. This is a good
7.
start. It's the shortest one. Griffin's going to have a take. It's titled Chainsaw Man. All I have to say, I watched it, the entire thing. I know it's only 12 episodes. I watched 5 of the episodes on a flight. It was great. I loved it. The story took a little bit, like, because it was only 12 episodes, I thought the story took a little bit to get good. But then that scene where they just like murder everybody, then I was like, all right, I'm sucked right into this show. Like, that was awesome. Yeah. So I loved it. It was fun. I liked how it didn't have like a lot of the classic anime tropes, aside from like the just excessive horniness that they did have, but
incredible horniness.
But they leaned into it. I think a lot of animes, like, they are almost making a joke about how horny anime is. Whereas like One Piece, they don't actually reference it in the show, aside from Sanji.
Sanji, yeah. Aside from the creep, yeah. I mean, the main character, like, you're exactly right, and I agree with you 100% that they're like commenting on the horniness in anime, because there's like a legitimate reason why this kid is so horny. Like, he's an emotionally, physically, mentally repressed teenager who has never had genuinely positive physical contact in his life. And so he thinks that like being a horny boy is going to kind of solve his problems. And it's like the only goal he has, until and I don't want to spoil too much for anybody who does want to watch Chainsaw Man. So if you don't want to be spoiled, skip ahead a little bit. But he realizes there's more to life than just being a horny boy, while still being a horny boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just so funny, because like in every anime, the main character has like this, I want to be king of the pirates. Like, I'm going to be Hokage, like this exquisite goal. And he's like, I want to touch boobs. And it's like, why are you so motivated? Like, because I want to, it's just so funny.
Look, at the same time, when we were in middle school or early high school, I imagine that was way more of a motivation to us. Like, I don't think anybody was like, man, I want to be president someday. They were like, I want to have sex. Yeah. Or I want to go out with this hot girl in my class. Or I want to date like an upperclassman. Nobody was really that, like, it's unrealistic for anime to make so many like 14-year-olds into people with these massive overarching goals that would take most people into like their 40s, 50s, or in most cases, never.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all I had to say. I loved that fact that it was nice, short and sweet, 12 episodes, because I literally watched 5 on the flight. And then I watched, I don't know, 1 a day basically since, and I finished it.
Elliott just pointed out in the chat, Ash Ketchum is 10 years old at the start of Pokemon. And I think he might still be 10 at the end of Pokemon. I don't think he ages. There's a lot of fan theories about that he dies when he gets struck by lightning in the first episode. That's pretty dark. I'm not gonna get into those too much right now. We'll get sidetracked. But yeah, he wants to be a Pokemon master. He wants to defeat all these middle-aged people. He wants to like rule the world of Pokemon, but he doesn't even have hair on his balls yet. So
yeah,
come on, Ash, like get it together.
Exactly. All right, I think that was a good start. It was nice and easy. Ease me into.
I love Chainsaw Man. I will tell you one thing about Chainsaw Man. You mentioned that it takes a little bit to get going. Season 1 of Chainsaw Man, and I don't think they've officially announced if they've renewed it or not, because it's a very expensive show to make, and it was like a really big production. Season 1 of Chainsaw Man is essentially a prologue to Chainsaw. Like everything that happens in season 1, which is kind of the case for a lot of these longer running anime that have like a lot of money behind them, or manga, I guess. It's setup. It's incredible setup. It's fantastic setup, but it's setup.
So you read it. You read the manga?
I've read probably like 2 or 3. I haven't gotten all the way through. I would say I'm probably halfway through the manga, and I've stopped reading because I want to wait to see if they continue to adapt it into anime. But like at a certain point, things really pick up speed. You learn a lot more about the characters. You learn a lot more about people's motivations. The violence doesn't get any less violent. The horniness doesn't get any less horny. It continues to be this like really incredible piece of art. And I think it's made for anime because the mangaka who wrote it is like obsessed with film culture. And so there's tons of film references that you can see in a manga, but are really a lot more entertaining on screen.
Got it. Yeah. Elliott said the manga is fantastic. Maybe I'll do what you if I see if it gets renewed. If not, I'll probably read it. But that was one of the shorter ones. So let's move on, or else this is going to be a 6-hour episode. Elliott,
I want to add and pre-sponsor. Next one's number 6.
Number 6. All right, this is going to be a good one. All right, so this is in reference to last episode. The discussion. These aren't my notes for your guys' discussion. This is answering the question. I guess it's titled "Does tanking work?" And I thought overall trust me, I have notes for the episode. That one's going to be probably the juiciest one. But sure. I thought that the discussion what you guys had of does tanking work, I thought was missing probably the most important point in that. How do you define work? Which you asked the question, but never really, like nobody ever really answered it. And also it's just hard as shit to win a championship. Like you could ask the question, does insert strategy work? And if the main objective is to win a championship, then the answer is going to be no, because like it's hard as shit to win a championship. And there's really only 3 ways to acquire them. You sign them, you draft them, or you trade for them. And unless you're in LA, New York, or Miami, you're probably not going to sign any. So I think, the most important point is, again, like, how are we measuring success? What defines work? Because like, if you just look at the last, like people that won the finals, the Nuggets. So what's the strategy there? Draft a superstar in the second round. Like that's not going to happen. Like the Bucks draft a superstar at 15 or 17, wherever Giannis went. Like that's really, really hard to replicate. And then like the Lakers and Heat was be in LA or be in Miami and sign LeBron James. Like that was the strategy. And then Golden State was like have a string of the most insane luck that will probably never be replicated in the history of the NBA. So in my eyes, the goal of tanking, at least from the Sixers perspective, was to acquire a superstar or to acquire enough assets to trade for one. And in that sense, I would say that tanking works because like what the Sixers got in terms of like their assets was remarkable. Now they fudged it up like post Hinkie. We don't need to go into like how many mistakes that they've made, but like they got an Embiid who, as much as we all hate him, including me now, is a genuine superstar, like runner-up MVP 2 years, MVP this past year. So to me, like, tanking is the easiest way to ensure that you're either going to get a superstar through the draft or enough assets to acquire one. So that's kind of my thought on like the question, does tanking work? I think it depends how are we defining it? And that was never really answered when you guys talked about it last week.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the conclusions we came to, and granted, it was definitely in the direction of we do not think tanking works. I don't think, kind of like what you said at the beginning of that, I don't think there is necessarily an answer to it, because some teams are going to do it correctly. Some teams are going to do it incorrectly. Some teams are going to make all the right moves, and it's still not going to work if the goal is to win a championship. The only reason that I think, obviously the Sixers were like the most extreme example of it because of what their win rate was for that 3 or 4 year period, whatever.
Yeah.
But the other reason that they were a big example of it was because, as I understood it, Sam Hinkie's whole explanation internally and the ones that he gave to journalists, like off the record, which eventually became on the record because he was no longer employed, and I think he was fine with it coming out, was that he was going to stack the odds as much as possible with as many lottery picks as possible to obtain a championship. Granted, we did not see the end of his process, so we cannot necessarily say that his project failed, because it stopped being his project halfway through and other people didn't take it to the finish line the way that we think he may have taken it to the finish line. But if the goal was to win a championship, as it stands right now, the process is technically a failure. Doesn't necessarily mean that it is a failure overall, particularly because Embiid did win an MVP and was in the running for MVP 3 out of the past 4 years, which is pretty good company to be in.
He's runner-up.
Yeah. He was a 3-time runner-up, right? Yeah.
2-time runner-up, and then he won it the 3rd year.
Yes. Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess by that, and look, we've seen this happen in the NBA constantly. MVPs don't win the title all that often. It's like, unless you're a Michael Jordan or a Steph Curry or a LeBron James, you're not winning MVP a lot of the time. I guess Magic Johnson and Larry did, but like the talent pool was way different back then. Yeah. Steve Nash wasn't winning. Russ wasn't winning. AI didn't win. Like, those guys didn't win.
Yeah.
So
it is kind of, no, sorry, go ahead.
I don't hate tanking as an overall idea. I just think there's an extent to which we've kind of gotten lost in the sauce. And I'd have to go back and look at the records of the teams that finished right above the Sixers those 3 years that they were like truly terrible, winning between like 10 and 19 games. Because if the next team up only won 12, then yeah, I understand winning only 10. But I do believe, and Jared made this point as well, that there's an element of, at a certain point, you're just fucking your locker room culture. A, because these guys never start winning, and B, because all of them know that they're not even going to be on the team when they do start winning. So the only thing they're playing for is a contract. And like, I think a lot of GMs probably devalue that when they can tell that you're just trying to like stack stats at the expense of wins. But, you know.
Yeah, like for those 3 years, the regular season was basically how NFL teams treat the preseason, which was like, all right, like, let's just see who's a player. Like the reason why, and I mentioned this in our Discord, and it's going to come up in a point why I think like the whole culture thing, I think is such bullshit. Cause like nobody that's on that team is going to be on the team when they're trying to win. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, it doesn't matter what happens in 2012 if their goal is to be good in 2016. And I don't want to go too far into this point because we're going to get way deeper into it later.
Sure.
But yeah, that's kind of why I just think that that whole culture thing is just BS, because again, nobody that's there is in terms of a player is really going to be there when they're actually good. But yeah, we can move on. I thought that ended up being not as long as I expected, but I think one of the points I think we're going to spend the majority of the time on. So Elliott,
look, in a year or two after this whole thing, I don't want to say this process has shaken out, but after this whole environment has shaken out with James Harden and Joel Embiid and like basically everybody that was part of that regime, maybe we do find out that it works. Maybe they do win a title, or maybe one of those guys goes to another team and wins a title, and we can say, you know, in the aggregate it won. But right now, you know, we definitely need to. We'll see how the Thunder do. We'll see how the Rockets do. We'll see, you know,
I mean,
how other teams that yeah, we'll see how these teams that tried to duplicate the process, we'll see what they're able to achieve.
Yeah. I mean, like, it definitely made quote unquote. It's like LeBron made player movement a thing. I think the Sixers made like let's stack as many, like let's get as many assets as possible. Yeah, basically, yeah. Let's get as many assets as possible, and for the sake of not winning.
Sure.
But all right, Elliott, what's the next one?
All right, your next one is topic number 1. The first thing that came into your mind.
Okay, all right. Now this is a perfect transition that wasn't done on purpose, but this is going to be the one where we're going to spend the most time because these are my notes from that tanking episode. And I'll just say from the beginning, the worst part about this is I didn't actually have any notes about what you specifically said. It's more about Ferentinos and Jared. So you're off the hook on this one, which is unfortunate because those two people aren't here to defend themselves.
Well, I will say Jared is actually downstairs on my couch right now taking a nap. He is staying in my apartment this week.
That's funny.
So I'll try and channel that, Minnesota nice energy and get in his headspace and see if I can explain some of his takes.
Sure. So I do want to preface this before I start. I don't want to make it seem as though I'm trying to defend the current Sixers because you will never hear me defend the current Sixers. They are absolutely a loser organization who I hate to my core. But I do think what gets under discussed, and you guys didn't say anything that was incorrect, but I think what gets under discussed is they were bad for 3 years. They won in the teens for 3 years. Like they were aggressively bad for those 3 years, but it was only 3 years. And then the fourth year, Embiid played 31 games. They only won 28, but they were actually, the plan before that year was actually to try and win because that was Simmons' rookie year that he ended up not being his rookie year because he broke his foot. And then Embiid tore his meniscus. But like the amount of time the Sixers were aggressively bad is the same length of time that Doc Rivers was their head coach. You know what I mean? And then every year since then, they've won 50 games. Like, no offense, but when's the last time the Wizards won 50 games?
You know 1978.
Like, yeah, exactly. So I do think like that specific part gets a little bit under discussed. It was 3 years. It was aggressive, but it was only 3 years. And in those 3 years, I did look this up. So the year they won 10 games, I didn't look at the other teams, but that was the only year of those three where they had that worst record in the NBA was the year they won 10 games. I think they won 18 and 19 the other 2 years. And 1 year they came in second in the East, or second to last in the East and also the NBA. And 1 year they came in second to last in the East and third worst in the NBA. So 1 year there was 2 teams worse than them. The difference was it was like a prolonged stretch. But now we're going to get into some comments because this was a word for word response from Jared. Word for word. I had to re-listen to it to make sure that I understood it correctly. He said, the reason why they, meaning the Sixers, are good is because they got guys like Tobias Harris and James Harden. And everybody just let him say that. There was no comment. Like, at least let's be real.
I'm pretty sure I clipped it. I'm pretty sure I turned it into a clip. I might be wrong about that.
Maybe it was one that you posted because that wasn't the clip that I ended up editing because I would have lost my mind. But like, I mean, let's be real. They're not good because they have fucking James Harden and Tobias Harris, like late career James Harden. They're good because they have Joel Embiid. You know what I mean? Like that's pretty clear. Like Embiid's first year that he played actually healthy, the first year they had Simmons, they won 52 games. Like, again, that's like some teams have literally never won 50 games, or like the Wizards haven't done it in our lifetime times 2, basically.
All right, we don't need to keep harping on the Wizards. I know they suck.
Okay, that's the last Wizards point. And then this, I just thought, this is what I mentioned in the group chat, but the winning culture comment from Ferentinos is the Bill Simmons stupid bullshit comment when you don't have any actual real life analysis to say, so you just like low hanging fruit. Oh, winning culture, which it's just so dumb. Like, do we really think that the reason why they can't get out of the second round is because they won 10 games in 2015? Like that was 8 years ago. What were we doing in 2015?
Jerking off. So I agree with that. I mean, like, I think there's two sides to the winning culture argument. I think people overrate the idea of culture, particularly in the NBA, where teams are a lot more transient than they are in a lot of other sports. And you have very few teams that have a lot of remaining guys for more than, let's say 5 to 6 years. There was a point 5 or so years ago, 4 years ago, where John Wall was the second longest player that had been on the team that drafted him at either 9 or 10 years. And Steph Curry was the only guy that had beaten him. So, and I think that he was in the lead by, I think John was in the second place lead by like 2 years. Guys don't stay on the same team for a very long time. It's not part of the culture of the NBA. It's not how these contracts work. I think there's something to be said for winning culture if you have a lot of continuity in coach and you have a lot of continuity in front office that builds a particular culture. Look at the Spurs, look at the Celtics, look at the Heat. Honestly, there's a period of time where you could say, look at the Jazz, look at the Blazers, look at some of these franchises that were winning between 40 and 55 games a year for a long time.
But
the Pacers are a good example.
But the Sixers have been doing that. Like none of those teams won anything.
Yeah, the Sixers are doing that now, which is why, like, I think that argument sometimes has validity and sometimes is a lot like the same argument of like so-and-so team wanted it more.
Yeah.
When it's like, no, they didn't. They didn't want it more. Every single one of these teams, if they're like a top 4 team in each conference, they fucking want it because they think that they're good enough to get it. Like, yeah, maybe the 20-win Rockets don't want it that badly because they're just trying to get their bag and they're all 19 years old. But like once you're in a contender stage, like everybody there wants it.
Yeah. And
I do agree with you that like it's a fucking bullshit phrase that we use to try and assign, intent to what is going on in sports when a lot of times it's just talent wins, talent and continuity.
That's the exact point I was going to make. It's like, my argument isn't that winning culture doesn't exist, because it absolutely does. But to say that the Sixers haven't gotten out of the second round was because they developed a losing culture during the years of the process is so stupid. And what made me what made me the most mad was he brought up 2 teams that quote unquote did it right, that didn't tank and that are really good now. He brought up the Lakers and he brought up the Warriors, which I just wanted to dissect for a little bit. And I'll start with the Lakers. This is not me hating the Lakers. I like LeBron. I've always liked the Lakers.
But man, you're good.
I think you would agree with this. Like the stretch between when Kobe tore his Achilles and when they signed LeBron, like they were a train wreck. They were an absolute train wreck. Like they were a clown show. They were a circus. Like that was the whole.
It was the worst stretch in the history of the team.
Yeah, like D'Angelo Russell with Nick Young thing. Like they were a train wreck. They got the second pick in the draft 3 years in a row, and like the reason why the Lakers are good now isn't because they did things the right way and have a good culture. It's because they are in Los Angeles and LeBron wanted to play for them. And then it was like trade for Anthony Davis. Like that's literally why they're good now. And that's not to take away what they've done around LeBron. Because like the title year, that was a phenomenal roster that they took a nuke to, and then finally now have a good roster again. But I don't know, like just to say that like, oh, the Lakers as in contrast to the Sixers about why the Lakers are good. And by good, meaning like championship level good and the Sixers aren't. It's just idiocy. And then the Warriors, and I did a lot of research into the Warriors because to cite them as an example of a team that did it the right way is so bad because the Warriors, I mean, before Steph Curry, they were a joke since the early 90s. Like I looked this up. There was a stretch. So they in 1991, 1992, when we were born, they were 3rd in the West. The next year that they finished above 6th was in 2014. So it's not like they developed for those 30 years a winning culture. No, what changed was they drafted Steph, Clay, and Draymond, and they signed Steve Kerr to be their head coach. Like culture is
and Bob Myers to be their president of basketball operations.
Like winning culture is having good players, having superstars, and then having like the right kind of players and like mindset around them. So yeah, that's the only thing that I want to say. Like I'm not saying that like the Sixers aren't a clusterfuck because they absolutely are, but the reason why they're a clusterfuck isn't because they lost 72 games in 2015. It's because like Embiid hasn't been able to show up in the playoffs. James Harden is late career James Harden who can't show up in the playoffs. But that has nothing to do for them losing for 3 years back in 2013 to 2015.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I did counter that take to some degree during the episode, or Jared may have, somebody may have. Because we did talk about how, obviously one of the ways for a tank to be a success is to get LeBron James at the tail end of your tank or to get Jimmy Butler at the tail end of your tank.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Because that will be the thing that puts you over the edge because they're able to take either a bunch of pieces and turn them into a contender, or they're able to trade those pieces and bring in other guys that will make them a contender. Particularly in LeBron's case, we saw it with the Cavs. We saw it with the Lakers. We didn't really see it with the Heat, but it was a very different time for the Heat and a very different team building style. And then for the Warriors, they are in their own way. And I know they do the whole like light years ahead bullshit, but they're one of the luckiest teams in NBA history because they got Steph Curry, when they got him, he had the injuries, so he had a lower contract than he would have had otherwise. The 2016 cap explosion happened right at the time when they were in their competitive prime, so they were able to get a Kevin Durant in his prime, who otherwise would have either stayed on his team or gone to another team that would have been capped out, or that would not have been capped out. And a lot of teams, and I mean, who's to say, maybe Steph Curry doesn't become Steph Curry if he doesn't go to the Warriors. A lot of teams seemingly intentionally fumbled the bag when it came to drafting Steph. Like the
Timberwolves had back-to-back
two picks.
Yeah.
And the Wizards sold their pick that year and didn't even have a first-round pick during his draft.
Is it the Mike Miller? They sold it for like Mike Miller or something?
Randy Foye and Mike Miller.
God, that
in
is
a year
bad.
because they were making a playoff push, and I'm pretty sure that year they won 20 games.
Oh my God, that is
like
bad.
It's not even so much that the Warriors are lucky, and I mean they are, and the Warriors are good, and they are. It's that everyone else was doing every wrong thing they could that allowed the Warriors dynasty to exist, including the Players Association that didn't ask for cap smoothing when they had the massive jump in TV money, because the Supermax players that are all part of the Player Association wanted to get the biggest raises possible. But if they had had cap smoothing, the Kevin Durant thing never would have happened, and we could have had 4 years of genuinely competitive finals. So all this to say, I understand all your points about, these teams being isolated outcomes that really don't say anything good or bad about tanking, because there's no way to recreate what they did other than be either one of the richest teams of all time or one of the most famous teams of all time in one of the best places on earth to live. There is a conversation about whether tanking, when we look back on it in a decade or two, ends up being the right move, because we will have enough time, I think, of the league trying to disincentivize tanking to this degree that we will be able to probably compare different slices of the modern era. But I mean, did we have that conversation 5 to 10 years too early? Probably.
Well, no, I think it's a good conversation, because it is almost 10 years since the Sixers hired Steph Curry. And it's and I think it's a reasonable point to be like, show me what the Sixers have done since the quote unquote process. Okay, well, it failed, which I think is a reasonable argument. I just think that to say that the reason why it failed is because they developed a losing culture during those 3 years is just total lunacy.
Sure.
And again, if your goal is to replicate how X team won a championship, well, you're probably not going to be able to do that, because it's hard as shit to win a championship, and it does require some luck. I think that's one thing that people take it as a negative connotation, and a lot of people do say it negatively. So I understand why that's a thing, but it takes a ton of luck to win a championship. The Warriors won a championship when Jamal Murray was hurt. The Bucks won a championship when Jamal Murray, when James Harden, when Kyrie Irving.
The Warriors also won a championship when Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love were hurt.
Exactly. The Raptors won a championship when Klay Thompson, great point by Elliott, and Kevin Durant got hurt. So there's nothing wrong with having luck be a part of your championship, because no team in history can say that wasn't a part of it.
Maybe the Hawks would have done better in 2015 if Cephalosha hadn't been attacked by the NYPD. Who's to say?
That's true. I mean, that's one of the biggest what ifs in NBA history.
People often say that's one of the biggest what ifs in NBA history.
Often say that. And then my last point, not on this specific topic, but just from notes from last episode. And this isn't a me saying that I gotcha for you, but I am genuinely curious, because you said that you're happy that none of the teams you root for are tanking, but weren't you frustrated with the Wizards because they kept holding on to the 8 seed for so long? And I guess, how do you kind of, I don't know, what's the difference between tanking and then being okay, well, they need to sell assets and stop trying to go for the 8 seed all the time? Because that's kind of even what they're doing this year, just to a lesser extent, with Kuzma and with Jordan Poole. They're not trying to just totally bottom out.
Yeah. So the way that I can reconcile it, and it might be a bullshit reason, when I want the Wizards to tank, or I don't even need to use the word tank. I don't necessarily want the Wizards to be a 20-win team. I'm fine with them being a 30-win team. I'm fine with the Wizards being a 10 seed. I'm fine with them even trying to compete for the play-in. If competing for the play-in means getting young dudes on cheap contracts, a lot of minutes, and a lot of development time and doing the things that are going to build a positive culture and a genuinely potentially successful basketball team, either through the guys that are on the team or the guys that you are eventually going to trade them to. My biggest issue with the way the Wizards have done it and the way that the reason that theirs sucks so bad, I don't need the Wizards to get a top 3 pick. I really honestly don't care about a top 3 pick. It'd be great. But if they're 30-52 and they get the 6th or 7th pick again, but they've built a system of development for a bunch of 21, 22, 23-year-olds where they do have the reins of the franchise and they are getting better year to year, I'm good with that. I don't want to watch a 30-year-old Bradley Beal and a bunch of older guys that they use to surround him with specifically to make the play-in, knowing that they are never actually going to get to that, like the point of being a contender. I don't want to watch that. So do I think you need to bottom out? Not necessarily. Do I think you need to actually have a goal while acknowledging that you're bad? Yeah, 100%. And the thing with the Wizards is that they never acknowledge that they're bad when they're bad. 30 wins is bad. 40 wins is bad. I don't care if 41 wins is bad. You can be 500. That's bad in the NBA. A good team should win at a minimum 60% of its games. The Wizards can't do that. So if that means tanking, fine, whatever. But I don't think that's going to solve the problem, because then you're just going to repeat the cycle with talented players who are never going to get over the hump because they're part of the Wizards organization. Shout out John Wall. Shout out Gilbert Arenas. Shout out Bradley Beal. Shout out Otto Porter. Shout out so many of these dudes who should have achieved more than they did, but they were drafted to the worst organization in professional basketball.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I genuinely wasn't trying to be like, gotcha. Like, I was, because I think what you said makes sense. No,
I don't think it's a gotcha. I mean, like, for a lot of teams, I think it would be a dumb point for me to say I don't want to tank, because they never get talent, and maybe there's something to that. But the Wizards have gotten talent, and they've just wasted it in the absolute worst way, where I don't think getting talent is necessarily the problem. It's developing that talent, and continuing to tank doesn't do that for us. You just need a complete tear down of the organization, which potentially we're in right now.
Yeah. I guess, and I think your point makes sense. Like, it's not necessarily about just being bad. It's like the problem with the Wizards was they would strive to be mediocre. It's like, okay, how do we make this team like the moves that they made were really, really short-sighted for a very low ceiling. So it's basically like,
we've sold first-round draft picks for cash.
And that's exactly what Elliott put in the comments. Like, how do you feel about selling your first-round pick for an expiring contract to push for a play-in spot? Like, isn't that what they did with Bogdanovich, whatever year that was?
What we did with Bogdanovich. It's what we did. So we traded the pick the year that we got him. And I mean, we were a decent team that year. We weren't actual contenders, so it didn't make sense. And we're not the only team that does it. Elliott just mentioned in the chat that Toronto does it. Other teams do it. I'm not saying it's only the Wizards that do this. For sure. The Wizards have a history, like the Mike Miller and Randy Fee thing.
Yeah.
They're objectively one of the worst teams in basketball, and you sold a pick during what ended up being a pretty good draft in order to continue to miss the playoffs. And it was for a short-term rental. Like, that's bad management. That's bad basketball. It's bad everything. And they got away with it for 20 years because our owner was loyal to our GM because they were personal friends.
Yeah, the fact that Grunfield stayed for 16 years or something?
16 years, I think, yeah.
That's crazy. Like, that is...
least successful, long-tenured GM in the history of American professional sports.
That's crazy. The fact that he was there for so long was nuts. Okay, all right. Let's see. Fun fact: first NBA game Elliott went to was Mike Miller's. Wow, best game of all time.
Send it. What was his best game? I honestly don't know, Mike.
I mean, I don't know if it was actually his best game of all time, but he scored like 4 you.
Is this when his shoe fell off and he buried a three?
That was I'm pretty sure that was in the NBA Finals when his shoe.
Yeah, it was just like a Wizards regular season game.
I
he
love
had long hair at the time. It was pretty cool.
I saw Mike Miller walking down the street once.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I don't remember. I don't know why he was there, but it was in New York 12 years ago.
So it wasn't even in DC.
It was not in DC.
I shared a hayride with Roy Hibbert, I think.
Sounds romantic.
I talked a lot of shit to Roy Hibbert during a Hornets Wizards game when I had courtside seats.
Right, he's local. He went to Georgetown, right?
Yeah. He's a DMV guy.
Yeah, he was at Butler's Orchard.
I asked him why he was so tall with very little talent to notice.
It's a fair question.
Yeah.
All right.
Did we do number 5 yet, or did
we
I
have not done?
We have not done. We did 6, 7, and 1, I think.
All right. So then number 5 is our next one.
Okay. All right. So number 5. I promise I'm not doing this on purpose. This is also a good segue. This is about James Harden. I'm not going to totally go scorched earth because I feel like it's just low hanging fruit at this point. But I feel like a lot of talk has been like, this is not just from the episode last week, but just in general about like, what was he referring to when he called Daryl Morey a liar? It's like, oh, like, are we sure he wasn't promised a wink deal? Like, oh, we'll max you out next year if you take a pay cut this year. Because and again, my sources are telling me, which my sources means what I think, is that if he was operating over the course of the year that he was going to get maxed out, like why did he leak literally on Christmas that he was going to go back to the Rockets? Like literally Christmas Day, they had a huge game against the Knicks. It was 9 a.m. Eastern. And Woj leaked said he's thinking about going back to Houston. And then proceeded to leak that pretty much every week for the next, 3 months until what is, I think, widely understood at this point. They hired Ime Udoka and he's like, no, fuck that. We're not getting James Harden. Like they gave Fred VanVleet, who is an objectively worse player than James Harden. Younger, so you could say maybe he's got a better ceiling, whatever, but as good of a player. They gave him a ton of money. So clearly it's like Harden just thought that, okay, I'm going to go back to Houston. Like I'm going to use them as leverage. And then I think when he didn't, or when he realized that he wasn't going to go back to Houston, then he's like, okay, I am going to take my money now. I'm going to opt into my deal because I'm not going to get shit in free agency. And then I hope the Sixers trade me. So my understanding is that the reason why Harden's pissed is because Daryl Morey won't trade him. And I mean, I hate everybody in this situation, but I kind of understand where Daryl Morey is coming from, where it's like, dude, if you want to get traded, just pretend that you're open to more teams than just the Clippers. Like, don't do what Dame Lillard's doing and saying, I'm only going to go to this one team. At least when AD, we all knew he was going to go to the Lakers, he at least pretended, I forget the locations he gave, but that he was open to playing elsewhere than LA. You probably remember it better than I do, but again, during his trade demands, he gave a list of teams. When Kevin Durant demanded a trade, he gave a list of teams. So again, I think everybody in this situation is bad and they should be ashamed of themselves and embarrassed. But I do think that, like, from Daryl Morey's perspective, it's like, hey, James Harden doesn't have a market because we all watch the playoffs. We all know what he's going to do in the playoffs, aside from those 2 games, which I will admit, I think you made this point. He probably should get more credit for legitimately winning 2 games. Like, if the order of events is why everybody forgets that. But I do think that you make a good point that, like, he literally won them more games than Embiid did, and probably Embiid's like playoff career in one series against the Celtics. But yeah, so the whole James Harden thing, I think like Bill Simmons said it best, where it was like his points he made accurately described it, where like he thought he was going back to Houston, or at least had the leverage to. Ime Udoka said no. And then he's like, okay, I'm just going to opt in so I can get my money and then demand a trade. But then he only gave the Clippers. So that, like, everybody else is like, well, why would we trade for you if he's just going to play for LA? So that's my James Harden thought. Not really a question or a point, but just my thought there.
Yeah, I don't really have a ton to add to it because I'm in the same boat as you, where I don't understand what the thinking was with the Christmas Day Rocket stuff. Because at the time, I thought that was the move that he did actually want to make. And then it turns out the move he wanted to make was to get a Supermax deal from Philly. Barring that, he wants to go to the Clippers. I think so much of it is likely based on whatever backroom deal he made with Daryl Morey that we're probably never going to know.
Probably,
and like
yeah.
whatever conversations they had, and maybe part of it was like, hey, if you do this, it'll encourage ownership to want to re-sign. I don't know. I don't know. I don't understand so much of this because Morey's not talking. The Sixers organization is not talking. Obviously, they have mouthpieces in the media, just like every organization does, just like James Harden does. But so many people involved in this are like historically super tight-lipped, and they're also like Daryl Morey's an asshole.
Yeah,
I don't know if you
100%.
ever read like a feature on Daryl Morey. Kevin O'Connor did one at one point where he talked in like glowing praise about all this stuff that Daryl Morey does that makes him seem like this like hyper efficient guy, and really it's just Daryl Morey literally being like the biggest piece of shit on earth. But James Harden and the way that he goes about business, I don't know if he's an asshole, but he's like, I don't even want to say he's bad at it, but he feels like he's bad at it. Like the lack of an agent thing, the constantly switching agencies when he does have an agent. the backroom trade requests while being unwilling to speak for himself in the actual media about those trade requests. Like, he's just an interesting guy in a way where I don't think I'm ever going to really understand who James Harden is. And that's kind of rare for an NBA superstar.
Yeah, I do think it's funny that, like,
I don't know.
The video of him, like, I'm not going to play for Daryl Morey, he's a liar, whatever. I find it hilarious that he, like, gave this, like, propaganda speech in China to a bunch of Chinese children who probably understood every third word he was saying, and then just cheered when he was done saying it. It was so funny.
It's honestly like that part of it. That's my favorite part of it, because I think that's incredible,
hilarious.
It's like a comedy skit. Like it's like some, like, I think you should leave type shit.
100%.
Like, watching it, I'm just like, what's happening? Like, is this like a green screen or something? Is this AI?
Is it AI?
What is happening?
Yeah. Oh, I legitimately thought that was, it's just so funny that he's like acting like he's like firing up these like 13-year-old Chinese kids when he's like, Daryl Morey's a liar and I'll never, and then they cheered at the end. Oh, it's so good.
It's funny because our NBA and I think to some degree basketball Twitter often refers to James Harden as Hitler. And you know, there's elements of a good Hitler speech to that, where he's just firing up a crowd with just like wild gesticulating and getting super angry about things that they have no idea what the fuck he's talking about.
It's the Dwight Schrute in the Office thing where he was giving that speech. It's exactly that.
Yeah.
I thought that was so funny.
Maybe James Harden is like the coolest dude in the universe, and he's just doing one incredibly long piece of performance art
bit. Yeah.
Like, he got good at basketball just to sell some sort of weird joke. Like, he doesn't even like basketball. He just wanted to play a trick on all of us.
I do think that, like, his teammates all seem to like him. Like, for as much shit as he's caused, it's like Kyrie Irving. Like, all his teammates in like the NBA, like they just think he's, I don't know, they all seem to like him, which, like, good for him at least. Like I don't know.
I'm pretty sure the two of them, outside of the Vax stuff and playing together, I'm pretty sure the two of them still largely like each other.
Yeah, I mean,
I've seen quotes where the two of them still talk positively about each other. Yeah, and it's like, you guys should hate each other.
I know. Yeah, the NBA is like a weird. It's a weird thing. Like they never will. They need to make a reality TV show about the NBA.
They do. It's called Basketball Wives.
Well, yeah, that's their wives.
Yeah.
All right. What's the next one, Elliott?
All right. Our next topic is topic number 2.
Number 2. All right. So this one is called The Process 2 Electric Boogaloo. I'd like to make a prediction on Wednesday, August 30th at 9:18 Eastern. Next summer, the Sixers are going to trade Joel Embiid to the Dallas Mavericks, because I can't think of a team that's more desperate than the Mavericks are going to be when they bottom out this year, because there's no way that team's going to be good, especially defensively. And I think that Cuban is going to be desperate to keep Luka happy. And I know that they don't have a ton of assets. I'm not going to pretend to be an NBA trade machine guy, but I just think that if there's one team, I know everybody talks about the Knicks. I could just see the Sixers being like, nah, fuck that. Like, we're not trading him to our rival. I could just see them being petty, and pretty much like with James Harden to the Sixers the first time, where the owner wasn't going to do that. So I'm calling it. I'm calling my shot. Embiid to the Mavericks next summer. Your thoughts?
I'm not a trade machine guy. I do try and keep an idea of contracts. I think the only way that can work is if it's a 3-team trade. So maybe it is Kyrie Irving to another team, assets to the Sixers. Well, Kyrie Irving probably like 1 or 2 other players to another team, assets to the Sixers, Joel Embiid to the Mavericks. I can absolutely see Mark Cuban doing that. I can absolutely see that being a last-ditch effort to convince Luka Doncic to stay. There's a very real possibility that if any tandem in the NBA is going to work, that's the one that's going to work, because you're basically getting maybe an even better prime Harden, who's bigger and more physical, to pair with Joel Embiid, who is still probably at the tail end of his prime at that point. You're going to have no other players around them.
Yeah,
they might only play 60 games a season, but if they go 50-10 in those games, not really that big of a deal. You're probably going to sneak in as like a 3 or 4 seed. I can see it happening.
I think that, like, the ideal running partner for Embiid, I think he needs someone who's like a motherfucker, like someone who has the talent, like basically the attitude of PJ Tucker, but who's actually good at basketball. I mean, I love PJ. No,
Well,
no
the ideal running partner for Embiid is Jimmy Butler.
I mean, fair, but I mean that's personality-wise, yes.
We saw that book. We read that book. It had a particularly bad ending for Sixers fans, but one bounce prevented that from being ending where you guys are going to the Eastern Conference Finals and then probably the Finals. One bounce is all that stopped that.
One bounce or one Ben Simmons.
Okay, hold on. The game was tied at the time. A miss was sending it to overtime. Miss didn't mean they won.
You're right. You are right. I would take Jimmy Butler in an overtime game. Granted, Kawhi was at the peak of his powers, but I would take Jimmy Butler in an overtime game against most guys that have ever walked this earth.
I just love the fact that this like unwritten history that it's just assumed that if that shot doesn't go in, the Sixers are going to win. When Elliott's 100% right, it was going to go to overtime. The Raptors were still at home, and like I think Elliott already made this point. Everybody on every team had foul trouble. Like one foul changes that entire overtime.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the same point that I make all the time about the Nets getting past the Bucks with the foot on the line thing, because they would still, granted, they probably would get through the Eastern Conference Finals. I'm not saying they wouldn't, but they would still have to get through the Eastern Conference Finals. And there's absolutely the possibility that a Kevin Durant, who is doing everything on earth, is going to wear down over the next 4 to 7 games and then get swept in the finals. Yeah,
I mean, that's fair. I think the bigger what if is if at least one of James Harden and Kyrie Irving are healthy. I think is the bigger bigger what if. But that is another.
People love to use the foot size thing. They're always like, if Kevin Durant had a foot size one smaller, and it's like, well, Kevin Durant's foot has been that size for probably the past 15 years. This isn't new information.
Yeah, he didn't grow. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. If he did, then there's a bigger conversation to be had about what's going on with Kevin Durant.
I mean, for someone that has like the freak of nature with body and athleticism that he does, being 7 feet, I wouldn't be surprised if he could just go gadget his limbs.
He's like Jordan in Space Jam.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, exactly. All right, so we need to clip this. So when Embiid gets traded, I can take.
We're gonna clip this.
Take my victory lap.
Very clip. We're gonna clip it whether you're right or you're wrong.
I mean, that's fair.
I mean, granted, if you're right, it's gonna be awesome. If you're wrong, no one's gonna give a shit.
No one's gonna care. Because you just gave out a wrong. Yeah. All right, Elliott. What's next?
All right, we're going with number 4.
Number 4. Oh, this is gonna be a short one. It's titled Gen 3 Pokemon. This was the game I played. Emerald when I had downtime in Alaska. I think it's underrated generation of Pokemon. Everybody loves Gens 1 and 2, which I also love Gens 1 and 2. I know that this isn't necessarily.
For 1 second.
Go for it.
Can you send me a link to Gen 3 Pokemon so I can pull this up while he's talking?
It's Emerald, it's Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. Those are the
Ruby,
3.
Sapphire, and Emerald. So Ruby. And then I guess was Emerald like the one that came, or just one of those one that came after, or they did 2 in.
Yeah, you're right. They did 2, which was Ruby and Sapphire, and then Emerald came out later. It's like
I think I had
yellow.
Ruby, and Emerald. I know I had Ruby, and I know what the guy on the cover of Ruby looks like, but I could not see his name.
Yeah, it's underrated. I think that Gens 1 and 2 get all the shine. I think Gen 3 is awesome. I think Pokemon didn't really start to suck until I also think Gen 4 was good, but that's not one of my takes because that's not what I played when I was in Alaska. But I know this is more of a comment probably for Ferentinos. I don't know if Andrew Simon's a Gen 3 guy or not. He seems to be only a Gen 1 guy. But that's a good point.
He probably knows them.
It's a good point from Elliott. You needed Surf, Waterfall, and Whirlpool, which is tough. That's for your water guy. You're just losing every other move except for one. But
you could also just get a second water guy and then put him in your
make him your
vault.
your HM whore.
Yeah, your HM.
See, I always had all 6 of them as different types, so I didn't have any spots to waste.
Sure, that makes sense. I mean, that's I think what most people did. Yeah. Not everybody was beating the Elite Four with an electrode. We can't all be that cool. Level 99, no big deal.
Wow, look at you. Before the Elite,
every single. What's up?
So
I spent a lot of time grinding, like an absurd amount of time grinding.
Not a judgment comment. I've done the same thing.
Yeah. And then also his maybe he was level 100. I thought it was 99 that it goes to. Maybe I'm thinking of Final Fantasy. Whatever the max level is, Elliott, who's commenting in the chat right now, that's what I got him to. And I used all of my stat boosting items to get all his stats up. So his stats were also
maxed out.
out of this world.
I love it. Was that?
Yeah, I mean, I do have to ask, like, how much do you think that take is based on the fact, like, we talk about how Pokemon sucks now. How much of it sucks now is because we're like grown ass men who are now like, these are the easiest games of all time?
No, it's a good question that I've thought of. I think the recent ones are legitimately worse because
sure,
like the two reasons why, and I don't know if Elliott's played any of the newer ones, but number one, they give you an automatic EXP share, so there's no effort into grinding. Like you're always going to be over leveled because everybody gets EXP no matter what. Like I remember, like, to your Electrode point, like you had to grind a shit ton when you were trying to level up for like gym leaders in the Elite Four and stuff, which just wasn't the thing in the newer games. And they also made adventuring way easier. Like I remember struggling through Rock Tunnel as a kid, like making sure that you had enough to get through Rock Tunnel. And then like, or there being certain points where you're like Sylph Co in Gen 1 was like really, really cool. Like with like the electric tiles that would like send you to different parts.
Yeah,
like that was legitimately
teleporting tiles.
Yeah, exactly. The teleporting tiles. Yeah, not electric, but the newer ones, like it's just way easier and there's no adventuring. So I do think that it's part of it is definitely nostalgia, and I do also think part of it that they are legitimately worse. And Elliott, I don't know if you agree, but he also made a good point. You get EXP for catching Pokemon as well, which you didn't do before. So I just think that,
I don't remember that. That's interesting.
Yeah, so they just made it so it was already easy. It was already an easy game, and they made it so much easier.
Do you, and Elliott might know this, you might know this in the recent games, do all of your Pokemon now get experience when you battle, or do you have to like turn an item on or something to get other Pokemon to get experience that are not, like you used to have to switch everybody out into a battle?
Yeah, so that's a point that I made. Everybody gets experience no matter what. You don't have to do EXP share. You don't have to do
That's
switch.
Yeah, you did say that. That's fucking absurd to me.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
I understand the reasoning for it, but like these games are already not difficult. You're taking away like one of the tiny little pieces of difficulty, and like then you're not even getting familiar with your Pokemon. And it's like, are you even raising your Pokemon at that point, or are you just leaving them in your fucking satchel and letting them die on the vine a little bit?
Yeah,
it's my opinion.
Yeah,
I had something else about Pokemon. Oh, you gonna stream on Twitch? You can do a little Pokemon stream on Twitch. We can do a little
there are talks. One of my friends from JMU, my roommate at JMU, is an even bigger Pokemon fan than me, if you can believe it. Sure. So I think right now I asked if he was down to kind of basically play the Elliott role, like be the behind the scenes guy. And I think what we're gonna do is he'll basically decide like, okay, this is what your team's going to be like. This is what you should do next. And I'm just going to actually be the one playing it, if that makes sense.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm going to watch. And if you're listening right now, if you're watching right now, go to twitch.tv/Jedi Modai. Make sure you click that follow button so that when he does start streaming on Twitch, you see it. I don't know if he's going to do anything on YouTube, but he's got a Twitch channel. Follow now.
Yeah. I think my plan is to keep YouTube specifically to like the sports stuff I'm doing, and then Twitch to be like, if I decide to do gaming, so I at least have some differentiator so people aren't subscribing to my YouTube being like, why is this guy streaming? Yeah. But shout out to Matthew Beck commenting on the chat. Yeah. Sword and Shield. That was
my guy, Matt Beck, absolute living legend. Love the man so much. Appreciate you being here. Thanks for tuning in, buddy. Yeah, I guess you might have another viewer when it comes to the Twitch streams. Maybe Matt Beck's going to tune in.
I'm not surprised you have another Matt as a friend. you just.
I have a lot of Matts in my life. Look, this is not on me. This is on a generation of parents between 1982 and 1995 who were like, "There's one name, and it's Matt."
That is. Yeah, that's fair. It's not my fault. It's not your fault. It's our parents' fault. But I'll probably name my kid Matt Jr. just to keep it going.
Matt the second. Excuse me. You're going to do the Gary Payton. Yeah, you could have two kids named Matt.
And then I'll do like Maddie for if I have a daughter, and then so
it's all coming together.
There we go. Shout out Matthew Beck. You got a great first name. All right, Elliott, what's next? I think we have
got two left.
We have two left. So you'll know what the last two topics are.
It's 3 and 8.
Number 3.
All right.
8's going to be last. I love that. I love that 8 is last.
They're both basketball related. This one is titled Ant-Man in reference to Anthony Edwards, who I think if he wasn't rotting in Minnesota, people would be talking about him like he's going to be the next Kobe, which he still might do. He has the sheer force of will and personality that he might bring Minnesota out of the doldrums. But whatever ceiling that we've put on that guy, I do not think is high enough.
I absolutely agree with you. I think Anthony Edwards, and I hate that this is not like an original me take, because I don't know if Bill Simmons said it or Russillo or somebody else. Somebody said that they saw him being a top 10 guy this season. I think Anthony Edwards is going to be a top 10 guy this season. I think, I don't know if that's even a crazy take. I think a lot of people are probably expecting it. I think he was considered like 17 or 25 or something like that last season. He's still at that phase of his career where there's noticeable, visible growth every single year. He's going to be coming off a FIBA campaign where right now he's one of their 3 best players. It's probably him, maybe Austin Reeves, Jaren Jackson Jr., or Tyrese Halliburton. A little bit of Brunson too. People have been hating on Brunson, but if you go look at some of the like ISO stats for Brunson, yeah, he's not passing that well, but the dude is lighting it up when he is scoring. I think Anthony Edwards is probably gonna supplant LeBron James as a top 10 player this year.
He probably will. I mean, I don't disagree with that.
I think that's probably going to be like the 10-11 switch. I think that's where we are. He might even move a little bit further down that list, depending on how we feel, about like Kevin Durant. If Kevin Durant only plays 50 games or something like that, he might be out of the top 10. I think Anthony Edwards is going to get a good amount of all NBA votes.
Like at the end of this season, we could legitimately be talking about Anthony Edwards about like one of like the top 3 players in the NBA. Like at the end of this year, like that's the trajectory. Like maybe not he'll be in the top 3, but like he'll start being like actually.
It could be like the Devin Booker thing, where it's like this is a guy who's 5 or 6, but he might be the best playoff performer of this entire generation. Maybe we get to see that from him. He's not on my team. He's not on any of my teams. And there are very few guys in the NBA that I want to stay like genuinely Iron Man level healthy more than Anthony Edwards.
Yeah.
Because I want to see how far he can go.
I totally agree. I just wish, I hope that Minnesota does not have a ceiling with Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns. They just don't. I think it was you who said they had a well-constructed team. Maybe it was Ferentinos. I could not disagree with that more. It's a terribly constructed team. No team in 2023 should have 2 centers. If one can't shoot and one can't play defense, they're like pointless. But if there's anybody,
trade Cat.
Yeah, they should. And if they didn't trade Gobert, if they didn't trade for Gobert, the Timberwolves could legitimately be a championship contender, just because I think he's got the talent and then the sheer force of personality. I think he has. I don't know. I'm not going to the dog in him, but the Steph Curry, Dame Lillard culture setter. Some people.
I think he's got some Dwayne Wade in him.
Yeah, D-Wade.
I think his willingness to attack is so far ahead of not even just his peers, but a lot of older players. He will go kind of like what we talked about with Austin Reeves, but obviously Anthony Edwards is way more athletic. They're not playing for soft fouls. They're playing to go through you. And that, if you have the durability to deal with that, that's the kind of thing that breaks teams. It is hard to play against a guy like that. And Dwayne Wade broke a lot of teams, even when his shot wasn't falling, even when guys weren't finishing his potential dimes, even when things were not going well for his team. He was scoring 35 points in playoff games because if things were not falling for him, he would take it to your face every single time, and teams would foul out trying to stop him.
He's another player I think that I see vibes is Jimmy Butler. I could see he's Jimmy Butler's not a good shooter, but he draws fouls. He wants contact and just the thing I love about Jimmy Butler is the same thing that Anthony Edwards has. Just I don't want to say that dog in him, but just the way they conduct themselves on the court is so. It's why, and this is going to sound so cheesy, but we are sports fans to watch people care as much as they seem to care, and the energy and passion they show. It's why I gobble up the Bryce Harper pandering to Philly fans, because it's
sure,
give us this is why we're fans, for Bryce Harper to pretend that he cares about us, and for Anthony Edwards and to show how much he wants it, and he's talking shit, he's getting in people's faces. It's
ironically, we did talk about how wanting more is not genuinely a thing for in most cases, but there are guys and there are instances where you can see individual guys or are able to push teams to want it more, or they're able to push other guys on the opposing team to want it less.
Yeah.
They're able to put them in uncomfortable situations where they're afraid of failure. They're afraid of missing a shot. They're afraid of what's going to happen the next time down the floor. Whatever it is, guys like, and Jimmy Butler, I think, is one of the best examples of the past like 20 years of a guy who does this. Jimmy Butler breaks teams. LeBron James breaks teams, but he's a top 2 player of all time.
Yeah.
Jimmy Butler is not at that level. Anthony Edwards is not at that level, but they can break. Kyle Lowry, Elliott saying in the chat, to some degree, he does do that. He puts guys on the back foot. He makes them make mistakes on the offensive end by taking charges, by picking their pockets, by doing whatever he's going to do. I wouldn't put him necessarily there in the Jimmy Butler tier, although part of that's probably just because he doesn't have the physical gifts, or the talent of Jimmy Butler. But yeah, he's a guy who elevates teams more than you would think his skill set would allow.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think like the closest we're going to see to the mindset of Kobe Bryant, I see like Jimmy Butler's up there, like, and I think Anthony Edwards is right up there as well. Just like the killer instinct of like, I'm going to go through you, I'm going to do whatever I can, and like there's something, and this is probably because I just like the frustration of watching Ben Simmons and James Harden, but like the player that has the mindset of like when their shot's not falling, like, all right, then I'm just going to attack. And like, I'm going to shoot 10 for 30, but guess what? I'm going to score 30 points because I got to the line 15 times. There's like, I think that energy is infectious.
You've seen the photoshops of Jimmy's face and Michael, or of Anthony Edwards' face and Michael Jordan's face, right?
Yeah, I have.
People used to make those with Jimmy Butler when he was younger. His face a little bit different, and Michael Jordan as well. And people used to always say that Jimmy was Michael Jordan's bastard son. And now people say that Anthony Edwards is the reincarnation of Michael Jordan, who's not dead. But it's interesting the two of them have drawn MJ comparisons, despite obviously not being MJ, just in terms of how they play the game.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It goes like MJ, I'd say number 2 in terms of that mindset is Kobe. And then I think there's room for like the Jimmy. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are in this tier. It's not just these two, but they're the two that come to mind. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I cannot say enough good things about Anthony Edwards. He's awesome. And the fact
I thought we were going to talk about Anthony Edwards for 45 seconds, and I'm pretty sure we just talked about him for like 7 minutes because clearly we fucking love that guy.
Yeah, he deserves it. He's very charismatic as well.
Yeah.
All right. Point number 8. Griffin, you asked this question. I'm just answering it. The worst type of team in the NBA. This is how I feel about all sports. I think the worst thing, and this is me personally, I'm not saying that this is the correct answer, but mediocrity, I think, is the worst thing that can happen in sports, like ranging from slightly below average to slightly above average. Like in football, I call it the Kirk Cousins effect. Like when you have Kirk Cousins, that's the worst.
We're just sticking on Minnesota today.
I know. But like, I mean, to me, I think like when you have zero shot of competing and you know you're not going to be bad enough to compete anytime soon, like to me, I think that's the worst thing in the world. That's why I think I identified with the ideology of the process so much, because it's like, yeah, those teams pre-process were in the playoffs. They're the 8 seed. They upset the Bulls the year Derrick Rose got hurt, but like there was no stealing on that team. And like, I liked a lot of the players individually, but as a collection and with Doug Collins as their head coach, like they could not have been worse to root for. And like there was a lull pretty much like post AI to Embiid's actual first year playing, where I just tuned out of Sixers basketball during the regular season. And then I'm like, all right, what are they going to do in the off season? Because I could not bring myself to care about a team that was so like the definition of mediocrity. So this isn't really asking a question. I'm just answering your question when you said like, what's the worst type of team in the NBA? To me, it's mediocrity. I think there's nothing worse than that.
Do you think mediocrity is acceptable if it's entertaining mediocrity? If you are an 8 seed Warriors team, let's say you're the 8 seed Warriors team, the We Believe team, and you upset the Mavericks in the playoffs when they're on 1 seed, even knowing that you're not going to make it out of the second round.
Yeah.
Is there a point where mediocrity can be overcome by like not having the talent, not having the team building, not having the coaching, but a team that buys in and plays hard? Is that better to you than a 50-win team that clearly doesn't enjoy playing together? Or would you take the winning team every time?
It's a good question. Like, I don't think there's a team that has lower, and you guys commented on this, and I took no offense to it, like worse watchability than the Sixers with Joel Embiid and James Harden. So that's almost like a perfect example. I still think I would rather root for a team that has a chance of winning a championship. I just think that I think 10 years from now, people are going to way, way more fondly look at that Warriors team, that We Believe team, because that was awesome. Like upsetting the Mavericks, like won 67 games that year. Like,
yeah,
that's not to say that stuff's not enjoyable. Like, I've enjoyed some Eagles teams where they like had a really, really like the double doink. Even though they lost the next game, is awesome. And that team really wasn't that good that year. But I still think that, like, if you're telling me at the beginning of the year, like you're gonna have to watch James Harden and Joel Embiid foul bait, or you're gonna have to root for a team that's like kind of fun and plucky, but has no ceiling. I still think that like there's nothing worse than just having no hope in sports. So I think I'd still take the team that's better, but it's a fair question.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a good way that you answered it. And I think Ferentinos, if he were here, would likely answer a similar way, because he always gets very frustrated when people talk about the Nets team, like the young guns Nets with like Angelo Russell and all those guys, Jared Allen, like whoever else is on that team.
Yeah.
And he's like, the only reason that you guys liked watching us is because we weren't a threat.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point.
It may have been fun basketball, but nobody was like, man, this Nets team is going to go far in the playoffs. So you were able to like them. If you actually thought that we were like contenders, you would have hated them just like you hate every other Nets team.
Yeah.
And I think there probably is some validity to that. Yes, did they play fun basketball? Did it seem like they bought it playing together? Did they just have a good time and that was fun to watch? Sure. Was I more able to enjoy it because I was like, no matter what happens, this team is not going to beat a team that I actually like? Probably.
I mean, they lost in 5 to the Sixers in the playoffs that year.
And then they did what they did with that entire selection of like superstars they acquired. And then we immediately hated them, but they were immediately significantly better.
Very good when they actually played together. Yeah, I think it's like, I think you can have the fun, young, plucky team for 1 year. And then the second you have expectations, then that's no longer enjoyable. Like the reason why that Nets team people thought was fun was because of how bad the Nets were for years because of that Celtics trade. And great point by Elliott. It's OKC now. They lost. I think they won their first playoff game and lost their second one, I believe. If they're an 8 seed this year, if they're in the play-in and they don't do anything, like they're no longer going to be the young, fun team. People are going to be like, all right, well, like you can only be young and fun for so many years. So I think that
I'm going through it this year with the Nationals. The Nationals were supposed to be the worst team in baseball. They were predicted to win 60 games. There's 30 games left in the season, and they're already at 62.
Yeah, first team to cash their win total.
Yeah, and I bet it, so I feel good about that. They're the first team to cash their win total. Is that true?
Because they had such a low one. Yeah, they're the first team that cashed their win total. Yeah, because
I should have juiced that so much. I didn't put enough money on that.
Yeah.
I was confident. I thought they were going to be a 70-win team. I didn't think they were going to be this at this point. But if they come back, let's say they win 72 games this year, which is still going to be below 500, but it's a good season for what was supposed to be the worst team in baseball. And they come back next year and they win 72 games, or they win 65, or they win even just like 80. Nats fans are not going to be satisfied with that, because when your timeline has already reached a point where you're like, okay, we're going to be contenders, and then you're not, people turn on you so quickly.
Yep. Yeah.
We saw it with the 2019 team that ended up winning it all, but when they had the 19-31 start, there were not a lot of people in that stadium. Things did not look good for that team.
And I know that like I think injuries had like a huge part to why they started 19-31. Not that we need to relive that, but I think like Trey
injuries, new manager, like there's a lot to it.
Yeah. But I think that's exactly it. And then you're like, you don't get over the hump for 2 years, and then everybody's sick of you, which is like exactly which I mean, I'm currently that way with the Sixers, so I don't necessarily say that people shouldn't think that, but I do think that when you can take a step back from like your personal biases, there is something that's kind of a bummer about that. But it's like, I mean, this team's won 50 games for 5 straight years, and I would rather shoot myself in the brain than have to live through another season of current Sixers basketball.
I mean, look at the Bucks, who won a title and have been a top 3 seed for like 5 straight years. People are tired of them.
Yeah,
Bucks fans are tired of them, which is like, maybe it's an expectations thing. Maybe it's like you're just tired of seeing the same players lose the same way. I don't know, but it's very easy to get tired of even good teams, much less mediocre ones. So I absolutely understand your point. I think it's very dependent on like how that team plays. But yeah, like you said, there's a time limit. Even if you're playing fun basketball or fun baseball or fun football, if you're 9-8 in football every single year and you never get over that hump, People are not going to. You can play the most fun brand of football possible. People aren't going to show up to your games. People aren't going to watch your games. No one's going to care about you.
Yeah,
like they're just going to be like, all right, pencil them in for a first round playoff loss.
Yeah, unless they like make some major change. And it's kind of what Elliott can probably relate to with the Bills this year. Like, I'm guilty of it. Like, everybody's out on the Bills this year because they lost in the playoffs for 3 straight years. They went to the.
Well, that's when you win.
That's true. I mean, that's true.
That's when you win. When everyone's expectations for you cease to exist, but you still have an absurd amount of talent, like the Nats. Obviously they didn't win it all, but like last year's Phillies, last year's a lot of teams.
I mean, the Nuggets, the Bucks, when they did win, it was. And
people were out on them.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, the like MVP point. Both in situations, back-to-back MVPs won the title the year after they won back-to-back MVPs, and they didn't win it. It's like something funny about that. Yeah.
No, that's a good one to end on. That was your number 8. That was
my 8th and final point. Your thoughts?
Wow. On my really, I'm glad we did this. I think it was a great 8th point. Obviously, I agree and disagree depending on the situation, but. Like, there's something about the word mediocre that bothers me, just because mediocrity to me also implies boring. And I think that's just how I associate the word in my head. Like, I think you can be a 500 or slightly below 500 team and be worthwhile, even though technically you're mediocre. But if what you're shooting for every year in and out is mediocrity, then I think even if you play entertaining ball, you're not worthwhile. Like, you have to be trying to do something. You have to be trying to win, or you have to be trying to acquire assets. You can't show up every single day and be like, look, we're a 9 seed. Let's fucking check that box. Yeah. Like the Wizards of the past. As long as the play-in has existed, that's who the Wizards have been. That's not fun.
Yeah, the Wizards and the Bulls are like my 2 examples for like. And the Bulls, part of it was like Lonzo, that was terrible. Like, obviously you can't predict that, but even then they doubled down on mediocrity with like trading for Vooch. Like, what was the ceiling on that?
And then giving an extension to Vooch.
And then exactly. Yeah.
I think look, we know it. We've talked about it. There's bad organizations in basketball. We're cognizant of that. I think the Wizards are about to come out of that. I hope they're about to come out of that with their new organization. I hope the Bulls come out of it soon. Like you said, they kind of got snake bit with the Lonzo thing. And then with some of the Caruso injuries and then some of the Zach LaVine stuff, they were a good team until all the injuries happened. So I think there's a little bit more nuance with them. But they've been a bad organization since Michael Jordan left.
Yeah.
And like even with the Derrick Rose stuff, like, they were still a bad organization. They just happened to have all these incredible guys who played really well together. And it lasted 18 months.
Yeah, Tibbs wrecked them. That's what happened. They all got Tibbs. Tibbs it did.
Yeah, Tibbs it did. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. All right. Cool. All right. Anything on your end? I just basically hijacked this entire episode.
No, I'm glad you hijacked it. I'm glad you had takes. Wow, I can't say takes. It's good to have you back. Welcome back from the non-continental United States.
Yep.
We will be back next week. Ferentinos will still be gone. I believe you will be here. I will be here. Elliott will be here. We maybe have a guest. Maybe we'll get somebody else on. If you're still here, an hour and almost 20 minutes in, thank you for being here. Make sure you click the follow button or subscribe button on whatever platform you're on. Make sure you comment below. Make sure you like. Make sure you follow us on all the social media pages. I'm not going to do the whole thing. You've heard it all before. Tune in next week. Same time, same station.
There you go.
Give and Go show. We will see you next Wednesday.
Peace.